Hello, good morning. It's the first day of the UN General Assembly, and hey, welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Neota Igbe.
Well, if the date tallies with September 18, it's a Monday morning. Certainly it is. Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Indeed. When you think about it, there are certain times when, at a certain point, everyone needs to look at what can I do from my own end. Sometime last year, or in the last administration, when the Ninth Assembly or thereabout amended the Constitution and made way for states to begin to generate and distribute their own electricity. Yes, it moved it from the exclusive list to the concurrent list. Many people began to wonder when and how would this begin to kick in. Now, before that time, states were allowed to generate a certain amount of electricity and distribute in certain quarters. But now means the states can go ahead and go the whole haul. And so one state decided that it's time to do something about this. Before there's news of this state, that's Enugu State, if you're wondering what state that is, I've been asking the questions, when would the states kick in? Because it's not just about, and indeed it's not just about the electricity right now. States can generate, distribute, and just generate, transmit, and distribute electricity. They can sell electricity. That's what that law implies. But then the other part I am concerned about is, when would the states kick into the rail thing? Yes, the rail system is no longer on the concurrent list, so states can build their own rail lines and connect from one state to the other. Can states come together and say, okay, let's connect our states because we have certain things that we can collaborate on. There are certain areas. We keep talking about agricultural value chain. Can two states say, okay, I have the mills, you have the products, I mill, you plant and grow and transmit over here, and I mill, and then we sell and we make money together? Can states begin to think in that direction? What the Enugu state government has decided to kick into would definitely pay up for Enugu. That is more or less considered, I mean, they're looking at being an industrialized, building up their industries and all of that. We're going somewhere. But how quickly can we kick into all of this? When would the investors begin to come in? Are the ground set? Security, not just security as in armed security, but also the security of their investments. Can they be guaranteed of this? These are all questions that need to be answered, but it looks like the Enugu state government has kicked in already and is beginning to answer some of those questions with the legal framework that has already been put in, and the governor signed that electricity law, Enugu state electricity bill, into law yesterday, meaning Enugu is good to go. Where are the other 35 states plus the FCT? Ayo.
Subtract 3 other states from that list. You have to subtract Lagos, Edo, and Kaduna, because available information says they also have electricity market laws and can independently regulate their markets. While other states without such laws will be regulated by the NERC. In other words, when a state comes up with their own electricity law, they have to have a regulatory framework like the NERC. We have INEC, we also have State Independent Electoral Commission, so maybe something like that is what the whole arrangement is about. But what excites me about this is the potential for so much. We know that all development starts from the local level, from the states at the very least. I'm very glad that at least some states are beginning to see it that way. But then I'm also not blind or ignorant of the fact that some states may not have the capacity by themselves. The ones who have it, what are they doing about it? Now, I'm also very, very happy that you mentioned, Nyota, the fact that we need to, that the states need to be very innovative and do all the things that they need to do, to develop their states and all those things. For me, one of the major issues would be the collaboration. The electricity law of 2023 doesn't allow states to transmit, generate, or distribute power interstate. Granted. However, that does not mean that it cannot generate it at all. So just imagine a situation where the states collaborate and say, hey, why don't we all collaborate? Why don't we all cooperate? Why don't the Southeast states, for instance, all come up with these laws and say, okay, we are all the same, so why don't we all do it together? Same thing, I think, we'll remember that happened with the attempts to come up with some security apparatus in the states. Each state in the Southwest came up with their own laws for Amotekun, Ebubeagu in the Southeast, and the rest of those things. So why don't we have such a thing as well? At the end of the day, the most important thing in all of this is collaboration. So we're talking about electricity laws now for each of the states now on the concurrent list. By the way, Anelta, I think you wanted to talk about the rail system formerly being on the exclusive list, now maybe on the concurrent. But the important thing at the end of the day is collaboration. Because at the end of the day, it is the people. The micro, small, and medium enterprises are in the states. There shouldn't be any excuse from any government. We interviewed someone over the weekend who was saying any state governor that knows his onions will latch onto this capacity to generate, distribute, and transmit electricity. So, do we have innovative governors? I know we do, but when is innovation going to kick in? Kola, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Very brilliant there, Ayo. It was cheery to note that Enugu State, is tapping into this. And one thing that is instructive that Nyota talked about is collaboration. So to what extent are governors working together, to see the actualization of this? And I recall, based on that, one very brilliant report that we put out not too long ago about the potential of the Enugu coal industry from time past, which as a result, powered the entire Southeast. While that's, a product of the black economy. But I believe that, to a large extent, we must tap into what is our comparative economic advantage. And I recall in that report, an academic who talked about how it would be important for the state, or maybe Nigeria as a whole, to withdraw from the as being signatory to the economic protocol, the climate change protocol that were signed onto in the past. So if we must tap into, the potential of that sector, perhaps it's important to consider withdrawing, from those protocols, because after all, we're not emitting as much as, more industrialized nations of the world. What's important is revenue generation. And, there are other aspects, that, we can benefit from, our free trade zones, for instance, when we begin to depend less, when aspects of states' economies begin to depend less on the national grid, and we generate our own power supply for those free trade zones, it will go a long way to help small businesses, and I was always talking about small businesses, and it will go a long way to industrialize the states. So this is instructive. And of course, it's also instructive to note that Electricity Law 2023 allows states to generate, transmit, and distribute, and also to regulate, because it's very instructive. Regulation is very important, rather, such that, the activities of those service providers can be checkmated to the extent that there won't be indiscriminate increase in power cost of services, so to speak. And this can also be, translated to the agricultural sector as well. And I recall that we have the development agenda for Western Nigeria. What's that organization doing to encourage economic development? We can go far on our own. One state can go far on its own, but many states in the region can go very far when they collaborate and work together. It's important that we begin to reduce the bureaucracy in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, and especially because land is domiciled in the states anyway, the Land Use Act, and encourage the states, to also work together to develop the vast agricultural lands that we have across the states. And to that extent, they will also have to work on security as well, because there can be agricultural development when the farmers are not secure, don't feel safe, to go to their farmlands and work. So that collaboration is needed, not just in the electricity sector, but in other sectors. Nyota.
It is said that woe to him that is alone. Now, if you decide to run the race alone, yes, you will account for that race by yourself. You'll get the gold medal alone. But guess what? You need a team. You need a people to work with. Even the best of athletes have coaches. They have people around them that handle different sides of things. So collaborations will indeed work for the states if they can put aside the politicking, put aside the ego and say, this is what we need to achieve. That's where we need to get to. I know a leadership coach, John Maxwell, that says, if you want to go far, go alone. But if you want to go farther, go with someone. And so going further, we'll take a moment and then we'll see what the dailies have to say. Stay with us. And so we start out with the Vanguard, and this is what they lead with. Outrage as RMAFC defends jumbo pay of NAS members, others. Conversations will definitely arise from this, but see the writers, it's disheartening, unjustifiable, unacceptable. NLC NECA, it's heartless. Ankyo Briggs, it's insensitive. Labour Party, I support living wage for all. Oro. That story and details of that continue on page 5, where you see the picture there of the Senate, the President of the Senate, the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, and the Director General of NECA, all of them there speaking about this matter. And it's a conversation, as I said, that would definitely be generating a lot of heat from different quarters. But go to page 5 and get details, and I'm sure we'll bring it up again sometime in the course of the week. But let's hear about the nameplate. FG inherited 14 trillion naira debt, over 2,600 road projects. That's coming from the Minister of Works, and that story is on page 27. 14 trillion naira debt. Meanwhile, get ready. Some roads might be tolled, so just have some cash on you, and just so that the roads are maintained. But you get more details on that on page 27. Nigeria failed aviation safety audit, NCAT rector. Quite a number of stories here that you need to look at. But see this one, 1.1 trillion Anchor Borrowers Fund, bank chiefs risk arrests. Yeah, there's those conversations that you can't talk about money without talking about the banks. What have the banks been doing? How have they been contributing to the circulation of funds or no circulation of funds, as the case may be? And then finally, FG invites NLC for meeting today. That's to avert a strike, is on page 9. And that's it from the Vanguard.
And up next is the Nigerian Tribune, which also toes similar path this morning. Well, a different one. August inflation rate, companies may resort to downsizing, LCCI warns. That's on the back of the new inflation rate set at 24 point, what's it now? Remind me. August inflation rate.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Okay, we'll get to it later. But there are two riders here. Wants government to remove tax on food items, urges TVN to pause inflation rate hikes. And, a picture inset there, captures the deluge that we experienced over the weekend, particularly in most parts of Lagos. 150 houses destroyed in Plateau flood. That's a page 27 read. That's a very, very worrying one. But NEMA has risen to the rescue to provide non-food items to people who have experienced one form of flooding or the other. There are some other stories on the front page this morning. Just under the nameplate, NLC agrees to meet federal government over indefinite strike. So it appears that negotiations are continuing following consequences of the removal of fuel subsidy. And there's also some stories at the bottom strip. Ondo commissioner beaten, injured over subsidy palliatives. So it appears like disagreements are brewing over the distribution of palliatives in some states. And lastly, more knocks for Obasanjo over humiliation of traditional rulers. That got quite some people, a number of people talking over the weekend.
He's getting.
Still getting. Let's leave it there for the Nigerian Tribune.
I don't know. The Daily Trust newspaper this morning is talking about something concerning that we have mentioned on this program quite a few times. It's about the Auditor General. Look at that. Auditor General's absence stalls audit of MDAs for 3 years. What does that mean? Constitution allows acting for 6 months only. Office poorly funded since 1999. Vacuum makes governance susceptible to mismanagement. That's according to Senate panel. Tinubu will appoint substantive Auditor General soon. That's ascribed to presidency. That story is on page 4. We can't talk about this enough because now there are those who believe that there is a civil society organization that talks about audit as being a way of preventing corruption. So if this is happening and we literally opening the floodgates for corruption to thrive, and
where does that get us in the fight against corruption? And if it's the same civil society organization that you're talking about, I believe we've had them on the program, and they've also talked about the need for greater autonomy for the Office of the Auditor General,
Absolutely.
the State Auditor Generals as well.
Absolutely, and you know the campaign is not even over because they're even talking about an audit bill or audit law that will create all of these parameters that you're talking about. But hey, that's the lead story. Let's get that on the road. 2.34 trillion naira spent on debt servicing in 6 months. Oh yeah. Now you were talking about 14 trillion naira debt. Well, it's a car that we service with 2.34 trillion naira 6 months. In 6 months. That's it right there. Story continues on the inside pages. And look at those pictures are of flooding. Flood takes over houses and streets in Lagos. Yes, that's that's added to the stories that you read the other time, Bukola, about flooding in different parts of the country. And at the bottom of the page also, flood destroys over 100 houses in Plateau. That story is also right there. I saw a video earlier this morning of flooding of a train station where Paris, and so it just raised my head. Hey, wait a minute. I hope the same thing will not happen in Lagos. Lagos, my head just went into overdrive, but that's what you have right there. Very unpleasant story. 5 killed, 12 injured in Lagos about a highway crash. Stories on page 2. Please, that road is now very, very tempting. Please.
Tempting to speed.
I'm telling you.
But speed kills.
Tempting. Please. But look at the story in inverted headline. Nigeria, Cuba sign MOU on food security, agric advancement. The details of that you find on the inside pages. That's the Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
And I have the Abuja Inquirer, but talking about that story about the floods, we've heard these predictions of floods for how many months? I think from the beginning of the year, we've been talking about floods, possible floods in certain parts of in certain states. What was done? Do we have to wait until the floods hit before we begin to start running around? Like headless chickens? No, we're not headless. We have heads. So let's use the heads. But hey, back to the papers. Abuja Inquirer and says, Hurricane Wike jitters in the FCT. Top officials want redeployment. Fear of probe over contract variations deepens. That's what the Abuja Inquirer is leading with. Hurricane Wike jitters in FCTA. Top officials want redeployment. Fear of probe over contract variations deepens. Continues on page 3. And then this is the one here that just below the nameplate, you see that blue box? Sexual harassment, varsities, police clamp down on 35 props, others. Page 11. This has to end. Our children can't be going to school and they are worried that their lecturers and teachers who are supposed to be imparting knowledge, are out there to molest them. Page 11, you have more details on that. Then you have above the nimble per quarter how Nigeria lost 8.7 trillion in 8 months. You need to read this story to find out exactly how Nigeria lost 8.7 trillion in 8 months. It continues from that front page, from up there onto page 3. And that's it from the Abuja Inquirer.
And from there, let's move to This Nigeria. And I noted that I can't get it off my mind.
Which one of them?
Nyota had to read that big story on the front page of Abuja Inquirer twice.
Yeah.
The one about Hurricane Wiki.
Well, it sounds like orange.
Yes, it really sending shivers down the spine of many, even journalists.
But I actually find the trillion naira loss in 8 months a little more exciting because...
Exciting or depressing?
Exciting.
Oh, okay.
One way or the other.
Okay.
Because, I mean, we've been talking about trillions all morning, Bukola. Trillions. 14 trillion naira, 2.34 trillion naira, 8.7 trillion naira in 8 months. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
What paper are you talking about, please?
This Nigeria is next. This morning. Public varsities fee hike, bad timing, say Nigerians. Want FG to declare state of emergency on education. Mass withdrawal looms as proposed students' loans not accessible. Well, there's no question mark, but for me, there's a question mark. Students' loans not accessible. We need to ask questions of the committee on the student loans law about the outcome of the public hearing and why the loans are not accessible.
Well, maybe the chief of staff to the president may not be a voice. However, it was his initiative, and he was there when the president signed it into law. And we also know that a lot of conversation has gone on until now about the process of students accessing the loans and everything.
That's the committee, House of Reps committee I talked about.
Exactly. So about time these things really happen because universities are already hiking fees. So exactly what is going on? Some of them do not want to quit school, but with hikes, it really is bad timing.
Well, as a matter of fact, on another front page, one of the headlines says the Committee of Vice Chancellors says administration of universities will not be practical, without an increase, a compulsory increase in the price of in tuition fees in universities. But the committee must come up, the House of Reps Committee on Public Hearing on Student Loans Act must come up with answers to why the loans are not accessible, and it must get to those who really need it. There's one more story that's just as compelling on the front page of This Nigeria. IMF warns countries to cut borrowing as global debt hits $235 trillion.
Okay.
Yeah, that's counsel coming from the IMF.
Another trillions. Okay. Nigerian News Direct this morning has this one on its front page. Lead story says subsidy removal. FG meets labor today over insistence on indefinite strike palliative distribution as labor's 21-day ultimatum expires this week. That story is on page 21. Sincerely, it's a lot to deal with at any given point in time, but it is our reality and it just has to happen. So many stories on the front page, but look at that one right above the nameplate, right in the middle. Ogun State raises alarm on cholera outbreak. There's a lot that we, the people ourselves, can do about this particular thing, and it's not something to take for granted. REA, that's the Rural Electrification Agency, to deploy Laseni renewable technologies to light up rural areas in Nigeria. That certainly is good news. A lot of conversation arising concerning rural electrification here and there, and then that's $250 million facility from the AFDB. All eyes on that one as well. Or maybe a side eye. Because there are so many other things.
Both eyes if you want to get results.
Absolutely. Governor Adeleke survives plane crash, alleges engines were tampered with. Wow. Not good news, but stories on page 23 for details. That's Nigerian News Direct this morning.
And The Guardian is the next one here. This time they're leading with the CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria. CBN's top officials on tightrope as special investigation peaks. The story continues on page 6, but I like the infographics on the front page there. Cardoso comes at a time when the naira is weak and inflation pushes households further into poverty. Does Cardoso have the magic wand? Those are the questions that have been asked. I mean, inflation's up by 25.8% again as of August 2023. Well, let's see. What would change? All eyes. Should I say this? No, let me not say all eyes on. I won't say it. Okay, but let's come down. Say up to Tinubu over states life perks for Wike others. That conversation isn't something that just started. It continues on page 5, where some ex-governors are still getting their pensions while earning from maybe an appointment or something like that. But see this at all. 19 years on, human rights languish amid African courts protocols. You have to go to page 4 for that analysis. And UN is speaking about UNGA 78. Says only 15% of SDGs targets are on track. That continues on page 2 as well. But see this other one that has to do with the CBN as well, just at the bottom there, below that red box. Beneficiaries complain as CBN moves to recover COVID-19 loans. Whoa. Now, some might have thought that those loans or those monies they got were grants or, call them gifts. But CBN's moving to recover those monies. Go to page 3, and I hope your name will not be there, Ayo and Buki. Well, that's it from The Guardian.
Up next is Business Day. And just a reminder that the 5 billion naira release this time around, part of it is a loan, part of it is a grant as well, according to the federal government. So in a few years to come, we may be reading a similar headline. But Business Day is up next this morning, and it trails in similar fashion to the paper taken by Nyota. Cardoso takes helm of CBN as FX backlog lingers. So that's another challenge that he's got to deal with besides inflation. There's this interesting one, and it's titled The Big Story, just beside, that of the CBN. The economics of Abuja, the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's this about? Find out on the inside pages. And lastly, Nigeria's major oil buyers among top electric vehicle users. Who cooks soup and doesn't eat from it? Ayo.
Well, I'm not really, it's not pleasant, because I'm sure a number of people also saw that video of some person in Asia saying the only industry the biggest industry they had was a refinery, and that they take petroleum, crude oil from Nigeria and sell it back to them. Oh God, I felt scandalized. Anyway, with the Business Day this morning, we come to a close of this segment, looking at the major headlines on the front pages of the papers. But there's more after this break. Do stay with us.
We are here not to talk politics. We are here to present a future to you. A future of a country that is so rich, endowed, and highly populated, very dynamic, unique in its culture, unique in our tradition, unique in our ethnicity. A country we determine that we make our prosperity possible if only we use that God-given opportunity of diversity for prosperity of Nigerians. We're sure to do that. We're not poor in knowledge. We are not poor in human resources. We are not poor in capital resources. We are only poor in management and leadership. And that is why I ran for president, to help all of us mold the soul of our country in the right direction.
Oh, wonder there is so much to unpack from that speech by that excerpt of a speech by the president. But this morning we have two gentlemen join us. Let's start with Mr. Wole Ogundare, who is a development economist, a financial and management expert. He's CEO Kathana Advisory, financial and management advisory firm. He joins us virtually from Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Ogundare. Let me begin with some of the issues that's been raised on the front page of the dailies this morning. The IMF is warning that there is something in the region of $235 trillion of debts all over the world. Nigeria is owing 14 trillion naira, according to the Minister of Works, and that's what the federal government inherited. It's also been revealed to us this morning that we service our debts with something in the region of 2.3 trillion naira. We've done that over the past 6 months. And Nigeria has lost about 8.7 trillion naira in terms of our OPEC quota. What do all these things mean to the average Nigerian, and how impactful, positively or negatively, do you see them being?
Thank you. Good morning, and thanks for having me. I think the challenge for the average Nigerian, in my view, is a bleak future that they see. That is what the average Nigerian sees on a daily basis. They see this bleak future and they are wondering, how can we exist with this kind of future? I mean, look at some of the things that you've highlighted. For the average Nigerian, it's all bad news. And most people have started taking this with a pinch of salt. Oh, that's Nigeria for you. You know, nobody seems to feel there's a way out of it, of this conundrum. So for me, I think that there are a lot of things that can be done in our current state. Maybe when we get to that position, we'll talk about it. For me, my fundamental question is always this: what is the big canvas? What is the big picture? What is the big future we're all looking forward to? And what are all of the moving parts in this jigsaw that we need to start putting in place, you know, to start reversing the trend of this debt? As an example, you know, we looked at the first year earnings or the first half year earnings in Nigeria, you know, nothing to write home about. And a considerable amount, somewhere in the vicinity of about 98% of our retained earnings as a country, has been used to pay debts. You know, and I also see a headline that you gentlemen talked about, you know, just shortly now, about the jumbo pay of our legislators being ratified. How does that play out within the context of all the global, you know, loans and all of the repayments that Nigeria has to face? So these are some of the very burning issues for me in the minds of Nigerians, and how, you know, we found ourselves in this position, which again is a conversation I think we should also have sometime today, because I have some ideas to share on where all of this is coming from and how we can actually exit this conundrum we find ourselves in.
Well, perhaps we can begin that conversation, because there's quite a lot to talk about, but let's take them as they come. You are a development economist, so I'd like you to speak from that perspective. Do we have the structures, soft infrastructure in the country to take Nigeria out of this debt? It's a long time coming. It's a build-up of so many years, possibly even decades. Consequently, one can say that the structures have either failed or they are being made to fail one way or the other. So do we have the soft infrastructure to deal with the perennial challenge of debts, such that we can stop getting debt? Yes, the federal government has said that there is no thinking along the line of collecting any further debts anytime, borrowing any money anytime within the nearest future. But do we have the infrastructure to pay back and not leave the inheritance of these debts to the future generation?
Very good question. Let me take us back a bit. In 2013, about 10 years ago, the federal government, via the Ministry of Planning, commissioned a project called the Nigerian National Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan. That plan has been updated in 2023. You know, it's if you Google NIIMP, if you search it, it's right there. Very comprehensive plan. That plan states that as of 2013, Nigeria needed 2.9 trillion US dollars to upgrade her current infrastructure that you've mentioned. Now, that is not even the crux of the matter. The main crux of the matter was that as at that 2013, our total infrastructure stock, which means the total cost of all our infrastructure, power, transport, water, mining, agriculture, security, vital registration, all of those things put together only contributed about 25% of our GDP as at 2013. Today, 10 years later, if you check those two figures, it's still somewhere around 25–30% of GDP.
Mr. Gunari, if you
From
can
a
hear me.
developmental economics point of view.
My apologies, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Sincere apologies.
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm not talking about the hard infrastructure. I'm talking about soft infrastructure that can help us out. Policies, decisions, issues like that. We'll come to the hard infrastructure. It's certainly a concern. But I'm talking about the soft infrastructure that can prevent corruption, that help us to pay back some of these debts in such that we do not leave it to the future. We'll come to the hard infrastructure. But the soft infrastructure and all those things that can help us exit these debts, do you think we have it strong enough?
So we have, one of the things I usually tell people when it comes to soft infrastructure policies and stuff like that, we have all of those policies. It's why I mentioned the National Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan. We have policies, macro, micro. The problem with a lot of our policies has been around the inconsistent nature of our policies. Today there's a policy, attracting a certain thing. Tomorrow there's another policy countering that particular issue, policy inconsistencies. And you see, for me, it is because the various people who have led Nigeria have been looking for various ways to navigate out of all the challenges. So they're constantly trying various things. So for me, the problem or the solution doesn't really lie with, the availability or non-availability of policies. It is creating the policies and being consistent in the implementation of the policies. Now, the thing that makes your policy work, because it's one thing to create the policies, the thing that will make the policy work is the hard infrastructure. So once we create, the macro, micro policies and, we try to implement it in various ways and it keeps on failing, the reason why I believe it keeps on failing is an absence of hard infrastructure over the last 40, 50 years to enable people to say, look, these policies that we've created, it's now time to implement it. You need something to implement it. It's like driving a car. You've created the manual for the car. Now you need to drive the car, following the manual that you've created to drive the car. That is where the challenge lies. So it's not really with the policies, because implementing the policies, that has been inconsistent, primarily because the car that needs to be driven is in a bad state.
I'm going to follow up on that, Mr. Gundari, but very quickly, closely related to Ayo's last question, is what President Tinubu will be pushing for at the UN General Assembly, and one of which, according to our correspondent, is fair financial practices for developing economies. And I'm wondering how that will play out because of what we see back home, where Nigeria, along with other African countries, are the forefront of receiving grants or loans from these international financial institutions for development of our human capital and infrastructure. So really, is the president on a strong pedestal to seek fair global financial practices from the West?
So the question is, in Nigeria, are we practicing fair financial practices? Look, I like context a lot. If you look at Nigeria, people within the ages of 0 to 24 constitute 63% of its population. Therefore, the use of ICT has deepened, all of these loan providers. You see a lot of young people taking all sorts of loans and not being able to repay. The problem is not really, for me, it doesn't sit with looking for fair financial practices and looking for additional loans and all of those things that, we're talking about. The challenge for me is structural. And you see, whenever I look at Nigeria's number one problem, which sits around our lack of forex, which has put us in this problem, dollar is currently increasing. We import a lot as well. The ability to produce goods in Nigeria at a certain cost is challenged. All of these things for me are the fundamental issues. On the global arena, talking about fair financial practices and all of those things takes a back seat for me as a person, because there are other ways, because all of that I see it as around financial engineering. There are other ways to carry out financial engineering when you're caught up in this type of conundrum. Nigeria as a country has been collecting loans, grants, ODAs for years. My question is, how have those things been applied within the country so far? And you and I know the answer. Those things haven't been applied properly in Nigeria over time. So still continuing with those conversations and ignoring the real socioeconomic conversations that we need to have and build a very, very good base to say, look, based on this base that we have as a country, this is who we are. What are the key priorities for us today? I don't think that is a key priority for the country in terms of coming out of where we are as a country.
And in terms of financial re-engineering of the country in relation to the soft infrastructure that we have, which ones should be retained and which ones should be discarded with, such that we can be less dependent on those grants and loans from the international finance institutions?
Great question. So one of the things I checked between 2016 and 2019, 4 years, I checked diaspora remittances, just the monies that Nigerians in diaspora were sending home. The total, according to the World Bank and the CBN, was about $68 billion in 4 years. Just these monies that people send home, and this is what they could account for. We all know how Nigerians some will send cash. Now, in those same 4 years, Nigeria, oil and non-oil, we did not generate $68 billion. We did not. So if you ask me, what is the low-hanging fruit? And you see, the first thing I checked again was which countries are really, really looking for diaspora remittances and converting it into FDIs for use by the federal government. I saw India was doing it, China was doing it, Rwanda is doing it. There are several countries doing it. It's re-engineering. And for me, why would Nigerians offshore, take that route? Because I heard the coordinating minister of economy, I think Minister of Steel, Wale Edun, talk about this a while ago. Why would Nigerians want to go that route? They just need to have trust and confidence in the current government. That is a very, very low-hanging fruit for me, and a very, very good way to re-engineer our financial doldrum. Imagine if Nigeria could find a way to convince a lot of our rich Nigerians, and there are a lot of rich Nigerians offshore, to convince a lot of them to invest in certain key infrastructure in a prioritized manner. And those same infrastructure, soft or hard, are the ones that will create the maximum impact. Imagine if we could convince them to repatriate $68 billion per annum in a structured manner, and Nigerians have the money. Just imagine it. A lot of the challenges we're having today in setting up required infrastructure at the state, regional, and federal levels will immediately begin to move past those challenges. That, for me, is a very, very low-hanging fruit that the surface hasn't even been scratched, even though we have an infrastructure fund. The surface hasn't been scratched.
We're coming, Nelta here. That statement you made just now, the remittances converted to FDIs, that's, as you say, that's one of the lowest hanging fruits that the government can ride on, but is to get to convince the Nigerians out there to begin to do this and in a structured manner. But that will lead me to something that we played earlier in the soundbite we played, the president talking about Nigeria not being poor in resources, and the resources there being both physical, mineral, and human resources. He said, in his words, Nigeria is poor in leadership and management. Now, when you say in a structured manner, that points to the fact, how do we get to that point where we can, knowing that this is where we are poor, is it that there are no good leaders or managers in the Nigerian system that can handle these policies that you say policies are there, but the inconsistencies in implementation are the problem? So where is the challenge that needs to be taken out so that we can move forward?
So there are two sides to this question. You'll notice every country has monetary policies and they have fiscal policies, because this conversation will take me towards, again, the hard infrastructure. You see, our current state of having 25-30% of infrastructure stock relative to our GDP is the number one problem. We have a structural problem. Therefore, a lot of our minerals cannot be converted, within Nigeria. So that's why even today, at its most basic, we export crude and we import fuel, at its most basic. Same goes right across a number of things. We keep on exporting raw materials and importing finished products, primarily because our infrastructure stock as a function of our GDP is poor, which is why I started off, talking about the Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan prepared, where Nigeria was said to require $2.9 trillion as of 2013, for 30 years. It's a 30-year master plan. The updated version in 2023, we still very much need about $2.3 trillion. And the updated plan says in the first 5 years, between 2023 and 2027, 2028, we need to spend an average of $150 billion per annum across the whole country to update our infrastructure. That tells me something, that the conversations we should be having today should rest around how do we want to move from 25% to 30, to 35, to 40, to 45, and so on and so forth. That is the conversation that will help convert a lot of what the president is saying from mere talk into actual reality and productive things that Nigerians can sell, export, consume, use it to generate forex. I said there are two sides. On the other side of it, if you ask yourself that on the monetary side, what is the fundamental function of the CBN? What are their regulatory mandate? The number one thing you will see is maintaining the foreign reserves of the country. That's the first thing you see if you check the CBN website. We don't have those foreign reserves to start with. How do you get the foreign reserves? Find a way to upgrade your infrastructure, hard infrastructure, and use it in a productive manner to generate the income you need. A lot of things around unemployment, all of those things will begin to, die a natural death if Nigeria starts to become anywhere near a productive economy that we are actually capable of. We have the leaders in Nigeria. We just need to be having the right conversation around the right things to be doing. You'll notice over the last 8 years, we've played a lot around monetary policies and all of those things. That is not the way to the utopian land that we're looking for as a country. It's not playing around with monetary policies. A lot of it lie around the fiscal policies, soft policies, primarily around the government expenditure on capital investments in this hard infrastructure.
Okay, let me come back here into our studio in Abuja. We have Mr. Adewumi Akinpelu, who is the MD of QSM Integrated Services Limited, former Secretary General of the Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors and a fellow as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now we've been talking infrastructure, soft infrastructure, but I know that your expertise is in the hard infrastructure. But let's just weigh in a little bit on the soft infrastructure in terms of human resources and what we have, and based on what the president said, and also the fact that Mr. Gundar in his closing statement talked about updating our infrastructure. We need about $168 million annually to upgrade our physical infrastructure. How do we get through this?
Thank you very much. Very good question. Like Mr. Ogundari said, the NIPPP that he referred to was done in 2013, like he said. When you said soft infrastructure, we have social infrastructure and hard infrastructure. That's economic infrastructure. I mean, let me break it down into layman. When you say hard infrastructure, that is, economic infrastructure like transportation, telecommunication, and all the power, So like he said, I think the federal government, we should now walk the talk by making sure that we come with homegrown, policy that will drive our infrastructure. Yes, we have deficit infrastructure. There's gap. So how do we go about it? Is the federal government will try and retain those social infrastructure like school, agri, and what have you, and again, consign the, economic infrastructure to the private sector. And for you to attract private sector, government must come with policies that will be, investment friendly and guarantee safety of investment. Like what is started, even the diaspora people, they will not want to come and invest their money in infrastructure. If there's no guarantee, there must be guarantee of their investment. There must be safety of their investment and repatriation of proceeds from such investment. So what that means is that we need legal, institutional and legal and financial framework. Like the Procurement Act needs to be reviewed. Some of our act needs to be reviewed. ICRC Act has to be reviewed. That will give comfort, minimum comfort to the investor, because fund is like water. Water gravitates to where there's least resistance. They will not want to bring their money if there's no guarantee. I think what Mr. President should be speaking to at the UN General Assembly is to assure the diasporans that bring your money in, I'm going to give you sovereign guarantee because they are Nigerians.
Okay, Mr. Akinpelu, we will take a moment, and when we come back, we'll get back to this matter of providing the security needed so that these infrastructure and the investment can flow into the country.
Exactly.
But I'll be in a moment. Don't go away.
The ministry inherited a total of 2,604 projects worth 14 trillion naira. And for 18,000 kilometers of roads. That's what we inherited. And between when we came on board and now, I think about 4 trillion is being paid. And so there is the balance of 10 trillion. Now, this 10 trillion, we have defined sources that could fund up to 4 trillion. Some of these projects have lasted for 20 years, some 10 years. In fact, in most cases, they are never appropriated throughout, every tenure. And so I went to seek Mr. President's nod so that I will be able to terminate some of the projects that have stayed up to 10 years without any defined source of funding. But the good news is that Mr. President has approved that there should be what is called a coastal route. This coastal route is going to run all the way from Port Harcourt, crossing many, many cities, north, south, west, central, and then end in Lagos. We have another cheering news of a superhighway that is being constructed under, PPP, from Abuja to Lagos, 460 kilometers. We've concluded 9 routes for concessioning. We have selected about 17 for Mr. President to approve for us to start the due process on concessioning.
Yeah, Mr. Akingpelu, welcome back. We still have Mr. Akingpelu here in the studio, we're talking about the infrastructure. Mr. Akingpelu, before we went on that break, you were looking at the need to tie the soft infrastructure and the hard infrastructure. You talked about concessioning the hard infrastructure, which is like the transportation and all of that, to the private sector. But all of that looks as if there's a problem. Because one would think that we have all manner of institutions in this country that should weigh in on this. We have NIPS, for instance, National Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies, and there's nobody that is in government, so to speak, that hasn't passed through one level or the other of NIPS. We have the Institute of Engineers, we have quantity surveyors, all manner of institutes, but yet we seem to be failing. Again, back to what the president said earlier about, the soundbite we played. We have a leadership and management challenge. How can that be?
Simple. Simple in the sense that all you need to do is to ensure that you domicile even the design of all our infrastructure. It's too expensive. I'm coming. How do we address that? Is to express that political will. Lack of political will is what is, messing up all our policies. Like you mentioned NIPS. In NIPS, every year, participants turn out researches. Even during my set, we turn out researches that you need to domicile some of these policies by engaging Nigerian professionals to drive it. And it takes political will. Then number 2, cost of governance. We address what Mr. Ogundare was saying. Cost of governance must be brought down. Now, coming back to infrastructure, what we need to do is to, make private sector to come in. And for the private sector to come in, ICRC Act must be reviewed, Procurement Act must be, reviewed, so that you will now concession some of the infrastructure into the private sector. Anything that has to do with economic infrastructure should be given away, and Nigerians should be ready to pay for it. Like the Honorable Minister said, that some of the road is going to be told, and that is the way to go. The Honorable Minister of Works is an engineer. I'm happy that we have somebody who is an engineer there. He has been advocating for rigid pavement, that is using concrete to construct some of our roads. Good. Private sector will come in if they say that the design is durable and it will guarantee return on their investment. So quickly, take home. One, institutional reform, like I said, legal reform, and financial reform. And government, not all contracts, not all projects can be concession to PPP. There are some that might not be viable. That is where the government can come in form of co-financing of what we call, viability gap funding. Government should encourage that. Government should be able to give, guarantee to investors. And government should come and make sure that whatever money they are bringing in to invest, proceeds from such investment can be easily repatriated. So it's a matter of political, will. And we have a president that is showing that.
This political will, before we went to that break.
There's a one instance on him. And also, the government should take the bull by the horn. Because MDAs, they are used to awarding contract. They are not too comfortable with PPP. That is one thing I want to point out. If the government is serious, the investors will have to come in, either domestic or foreign, investors. And you have to remove this government bureaucracy, all this corrupt practice, all this human element, corruption, so that the investors will be assured. They need comfort to bring in the money.
Just real quick, my colleagues are going to ask you a question, but before they come in, you were saying something about the sovereign guarantees.
Yes.
Is that what you mean, or is that part of the political will you're implying?
Exactly.
Sovereign guarantees to Nigerians in the diaspora?
Yes, that one is because they are Nigerians. Government over the years might have been feeling reluctant to give foreigners sovereign guarantee, because if there is default, some of the government property might be seized, it might be, but they are Nigerians. They can easily, be given sovereign guarantee that bring your money. Hi, we give you guarantee that your investment is safe. There's, open policy in contract award. There is guarantee in contract enforceability. That is what I mean by legal reforms. That if there's any infraction, either on the part of the party, the government, or the investor, you can easily go to the court to seek redress. So that is what I mean by legal, reform. And then the financial reform. Government should be able to have a kind of infrastructure fund that if there's any gap, because of lack of time, not all projects are viable by the time you do your feasibility study, but government should be able to give a kind of, co-financing something. That's another thing government can, do.
Yeah, Mr. Akinpelu, speaking of sustainability in government policy, particularly as it has to do with public procurement, there is a brewing disagreement between the Minister of Works and contractors for road projects over what seems to be a professional disposition towards how to do the job. That's the use of concrete technology on the one hand, where the contractors would rather continue with asphalt because of what they think would be a higher cost, on government finances if they had to go the way of concrete technology. How does this affect public procurement? How do you weigh in on this?
Like I said, it's a kind of innovative idea that the minister is bringing in. I support that idea because of the condition of our soil, especially in the southern part, southeast and south, south. The soil condition is bad there, and there's no way you can be using asphalt, pavement. That is what we call flexible, pavement. The rigid pavement, will be fine to do that using concrete. And how to go about that is very simple. One, government needs to now look for areas where you are going to get quarries. Because when you are talking of rigid pavement, that is concrete road, 60% of material you need will come from quarry. The stone base you need, the granite you need, the chippings you need, the cement, stone doors you need to do this construction will come from quarry. Government can give licenses. So, Federal Ministry of Works can be given that, advantage. Have quarry that will be turning out the material you need for this one. And the good news is that BOA is now trying to say is going to bring down the cost of cement to about 3,000. So these are the things that government should look at. Because of time, going to the need, I think what Honorable Minister should do is to call all the professionals in the built environment, QoS, engineers, architects, to go and brainstorm on how to implement that as policy. It's a novel idea, and I'm in support of that idea because it will now bring down the cost. By the time you give quarry, in the 6 geopolitical zone to the Federal Ministry of Works. And also, we need to domicile our design. Infrastructure is too expensive in terms of finance and cost and scope. Most nations develop their infrastructure using their construction professionals. Nigerian government has 7 professional bodies in the built environment: architect, engineer, QoS, town planner, name it.
But Mr.
Akinpelu, government should challenge them.
Mr. Akinpelu, in the long run, which is cheaper, the asphalt technology or concrete technology? And
concrete, super.
In the long run or in the immediate term?
In the long run, in concrete, rigid pavement, I mean, rigid pavement is better. Initial cost might be high, but when you look at the what you call life costing of the of the pavement, you will discover that concrete pavement is cheaper. Initial capital outlay might be high. So now address that is what I'm saying, that what Minister of Works should do is to approach the federal government, concession some quarries in notable strategic, nations throughout the geopolitical zone. Because 60% of material they need for rigid pavement, we have it here. We have it. When you are talking of rigid pavement, majorly you are talking of premise concrete, design concrete,
okay.
And what are the components of concrete? You are talking of granite, you are talking of cement, you are talking of... So we have it here. It's cheaper. The Honorable Minister knows what he's doing.
Well,
and that is the way to go.
Yes, interestingly, the 14 trillion naira debt, well, let me come to you, Mr. Ogundare. Interestingly, the 14 trillion naira debt that the minister was talking about was only for his own ministry, and that's not to say that that's all of the debt that we, of course, it's information that is available to you as well. But you are also trying to talk about infrastructure deficits. The other time, over the years, we've heard over and over again, a number of people come out and tell us that we need X amount of money every year for quite a number of years to be able to catch up in terms of infrastructure. And I'm not also unaware, you are as well, I'm sure, that we have infrastructure, abandoned projects all over the place. Very, very many of them, federal projects, state projects, and all of that. One of which is, and fundamentally speaking, so, is the Ajaokuta project. How do we catch up with all of these things? Because without infrastructure, you talked about that plan, that infrastructure plan. How does that infrastructure plan you mentioned the other time, how does it factor in all of these abandoned projects, this Ajaokuta project and so many other projects like that all over the nation, both federal and state government owned?
Thank you very much. So for me, it's simple. Every single project, look, run them through a standardized framework for prioritizing projects. What do I mean by that? Every single project must have a strategic fit. They must have the required economic impact. The financial health of that project must be assessed. The social welfare of that project must be looked at. The challenge with a lot of the projects that we usually invest in is we don't run them through these kinds of frameworks. So, for instance, is that project in line with the regional development objectives, as an example? What is the GDP contribution of that project? What is it? How will it be financed end to end? Is there a fundamental need for the project? Are there clear social benefits, for the project? We need to look at all of these things per project. Abandoned, about to be started, being conceptualized. The moment you go this route, you will only invest in projects that contribute and have the required impact, on the socioeconomy. Not, just setting up projects just for the fun of it. We've seen, some states, build certain projects and, the thing is covered in cobwebs, the next number of years. And you're wondering, why did you spend money on this? With the Ajaokuta one you mentioned, I mean, it has gone...
Just a second, Mr. Ogundare. Who should be asking these questions that you've raised? Because you know as well as I do that a good number of times, maybe be the president or the state governor will come in and, in most cases, stop the projects initiated by the previous administration and start their own and stuff like that. We have them in various shades in every, industry, the road project, bridge project, whatever it is, a good number of them. So who should be asking these questions in a way that, irrespective of which government comes into office, that project is not abandoned?
Again, that's a good question. Let me give you my response to that, and I'll use the infrastructure master plan for this. For the infrastructure master plan, there was a need to create an infrastructure delivery unit. and formulate and pass an NIIMP Act for continuity, which is what you're talking about, and then communicate same in a very broad manner to any and everybody, across the world. There's also the need to create a governance model. For me, these things are the things that ensure that whatever it is you're doing is consistent after having run it through, a framework to really, really determine how this will contribute and the sort of impact it will create. So for me, the NAS has a major role to play in all of this, in saying that, look, over the next number of years, this is now an act. It will be difficult for any government just to come in and say, look, we're discontinuing it, because they can actually prove that this project is contributing, to the economy in the way in which it should contribute. The challenge in Nigeria over the last 40, 50 years has been ensuring that we have a continuity in government projects, which is why I use the example of those things that we tried to do when we were preparing that National Infrastructure Master Plan. I say we because I was involved.
Yeah, well, you see, how that will all play out eventually is something that a good number of Nigerians will be waiting to see. You talked about the National Assembly, and that's quite the, institution to get some of these things into place. But then, those who also believe that with the political interests and all of those things, the wheel of governance sometimes move too slowly. But for now, gentlemen, we have to thank you for the privilege of having you here this morning. Wale Ogundare is a development economist, financial and management expert, CEO, Kathana Advisory, a financial management advisory firm. Thank you so much for your time. We've also had Mr. Adeomi Akinpelu, MD and CEO, QSM Integrated Services Limited. He's former Secretary General of the Nigeria Institute of Quantity Surveyors. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're back in a moment. Do join us again.
Good morning, and thank you for staying with us. Switching lanes now to look at what's going on in Imo State preparations for the governorship elections, which are around the corner, and all the activities of campaigning and all of that. To help us see what's happening, preparations for the elections, insecurity, and allegations against parties of a sponsorship of insecurity, we have Gozie Nwachukwu, who is the Director of Administration and spokesperson of the Imo State PDP 2023 Governorship Campaign Organization, and he joins us via Zoom. Mr. Nwachukwu, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off real quick here, and that matter of preparations for the elections in Imo State, how's that going for you and your party?
Well, for us, we've sort of taken the bull by the horn, because despite the very nagging and very serious security challenges in the state, we've taken off and we've been able to go around the LGAs to try to do an on-the-spot assessment of the state of things in the LGA and try to bring our message of making Imo safe again to our people, a message of bringing safety of lives and property back to the state, restoring safety of lives and property back to the state, and then also prosperity. So we've been able to conclude our LGA tours, and we're also commencing our engagements in groups, town hall meetings, and also trying to be careful in order not to be caught up in the whole security milieu.
You know, in this submission, this few seconds that you've made your submissions here, you've mentioned the word insecurity about 3 times. Are you not painting a dire picture? If it's so bad, why should elections even take place?
Yes, what has happened is that if you ever saw the inter-society group reports of April, May, and June, you could see that in Imo State in the last 2 years, the last 3 years, close to 300 persons have been killed in this state, over 500 persons missing, and that's a warlike situation. Because even in some enclaves where you have wars, that could compete for numbers. What has happened in this state is that I believe that most of what has gone on here is nationally underreported. Because if you go to places like Uguta local government, Uhanjebema local government, places like Osu local government, Oru East local government, where the governor Hope Uzodinma comes from, Olu local government, most of those local governments, you can practically have most of the community's life. Most of the people have vacated their homes. Most of them, their homes are burnt. They've been displaced. And that's the truth of the matter. Okigwe local government, about 5 of the 11 wards in those areas would hardly have people there, Igube, Amoro, and so on. If you go to Onimo local government, the same. What has happened is that we're bringing this to the fore because during the last elections, in these areas where you didn't have people, humongous figures and results of election emanated from those areas. I'll give you one example. In some place, if you look at the Beavers reports, the Beavers accreditation reports from certain places like Umuhu Primary School, I want to be specific. Umuhu Primary School is a polling unit in Oru East local government. The Beavers report, supplied by INEC, certified by INEC, shows that in that polling unit, there were 0 allocations. But in that polling unit, APC was given about 375 votes. You go to a place like Okigwe local government. In Okigwe local government, during the National Assembly and presidential elections, you see a situation where the total accreditation was about 2,403. Total accreditation for Okigwe local government. But the APC candidate scored over about 40,300 votes in one local government, where the total accreditation was 2,000 something. So what has happened is that some people have profited electorally from this insecurity in Imo State. And that is why we're coming to bring it to the fore for INEC to tell us how did this happen and for it to be forestalled. Because you can have a situation where in areas like Osu local government, where the whole polling units in the whole of the local government were brought to the local government headquarters. Where were you going to get people from all the wards and communities and polling units to come to only a place?
What you're saying here, Mr. Nwachukwu, is that the allegations that some of you are the ones from the opposition party are the ones sponsoring this insecurity. Do you deny that?
Of course. I mean, even denial is an understatement. Denial is an understatement. I want to give you a little bit of a historical perspective of these phantom accusations. By 2021, when this governor came in, first of all, he accused, in 2020, to be precise, he accused the former governor of the state, Rocha Sokoroche, of being responsible for insecurity, even molested him at some point. Where has that got? Not even an indictment, nothing to it. In fact, by December 2020, he said by January 2021 on the 3rd that he was going to announce to Nigerians, those who are responsible for insecurity in Imo State, till date, that January 3rd, of the Hope was on the January 3rd, and his announcement is yet to come. At some point, Uche was the former chief of staff to the Imo State governor and the former candidate of the APC in Imo State, who actually had the ticket which he's using today to sit as governor, was even abducted. He was abducted from an Anglican church in Nkwere, where he was holding his mother's outing service after burying her. He was abducted from that church on the guise of insecurity. Today, where has that gotten? No indictments, nothing. After that, he moved on. He said it was the former governor, the PDP gubernatorial candidate and governor, Emeki Hedion, and even Gerald Irun, the deputy governor. They were also arrested on trumped-up charges. Ikenga Imo Ugochinyere, the honorable member representing Idato North and South Federal constituency, at some point was accused by this same governor. Till date, no indictments. Till date, they're not even being charged for anything. So do you even take the man's accusations for anything? These things are just ways to paint the opposition black. The insecurity in Imo State partly is because of ineptitude of governance. I want to tell you what has happened. Ineptitude of governance. Two, some of it also is contrived. Some of what has gone on here is contrived. Some people are benefiting because you can't tell me there's no nexus. There's no nexus between the insecurity in Imo State and the humongous, phantom, funny figures that have emanated from some polling units where there are daring insecurity. People have benefited from it, and those persons that have benefited from it, there's what you call a presumption of guilt. The guilt lies with them to come and show now that if you benefit from a circumstance that shouldn't have been, and you're celebrating it, you should come and tell us why that should be. The primary duty of governance under the ground norm, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, is the protection of rights and property.
Since you talked about proof here, in our jurisprudence, if I do remember correctly, is he who accuses that has the right to prove. So you have done some accusations here. So do you have proof?
Yes. The proof I've laid on the table. The proof I've laid on the table is circumstantial proof. What are the circumstantial proof now? That somebody has profited from an incident. It's like it's somebody who profits from the process of crime. Somebody who profits from the process of crime is also deemed to be part of the crime. I am saying categorically that the All Progressive Congress in Imo State and the governor himself and his party in Okigwe Senate, in Olu Senate, in most of the federal constituencies, Olu Federal Constituency, to be very precise, in 24 out of the 27 local government state constituency in the Imo State election, and they profited from the insecurity in the state. And I am saying now that the onus has moved from me, but I am saying if a Beaver's accreditation shows that the total accreditation is 2,400 and something, and somebody has 40,000 in that place, come on, this person has to come and explain to us what happened, what magic happened.
Mr. Watu, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
You're a father. Would you, in your house, for instance, set your house on fire just to annoy your neighbor?
Contextually, I need to get what you mean by that. Because,
I'm asking the question because of what you said, that you put out circumstantial proof and all of that. So that's what I'm saying. Would you, as a father, set your house on fire to annoy maybe your neighbor who's trying to come in?
Yes, let me tell you what has happened. No father, because the context you have brought is not really akin to what has happened in Imo. Number one, the governor of the state and the party in power are not fathers in any way. This is, for them, this is a game of power. And power is about the end justifying the means. They have exercised the levers of power like totalitarian rulers. They don't have the qualities of a father. A father has empathy. Come and look at what is going on in Imo State. Come and look at the place. Come and look at the civil service. Come and look at the infrastructure. Let me ask you a question. Which father starves his people, his sons? Even the Holy Scriptures says that which father, which son will ask for bread from the father and he gives him a snake? The governor of Imo State, since January 2020, when he came in, this government has received, let me just deal with local government allocations. This government has received over 100 billion. They receive an average of 2.3 to 2.4 billion monthly as local government allocations in Imo State. I want you to take a tour of those 27 local governments and show me if there's any semblance of a father who has managed the resources of his state. Okay. We don't have a father ruling over this state.
All right, Mr. Watu, we will take a moment and we'll come back to this conversation. Hopefully we'll have someone representing the Imo State governor here to respond to some of the things you said. We're back in a moment. Please don't go away. Welcome back. We still have Mr. Nwachukwu, Gozie Nwachukwu, Director of Administration and Spokesperson of the Imo State Governorship Campaign 2023, joining us virtually from Owerri, the Imo State capital. Mr. Nwachukwu, you've talked about the fact that since this government started out, they've not really done much, and they received over 100 billion. That's according to you, they've received over 100 billion, and they've not done much, especially in the local government areas. What would you say that your party did all the while you were there before APC took over?
Okay, let me give that. First of all, when our party were in power, the local government system in Imo State was functioning. What do you mean by function? When you get to a local government system, you see staffs, you see the offices up and running, you see rural health centers being rehabilitated, renovated. You see some local roads being rehabilitated. You also see some water schemes at that level being done. I can tell you that whatever you see in infrastructural development in any of the states in Imo State were majorly put in place by the PDP governments, successive ones that were in Imo State. I can also tell you that when you had the Rocha Sokorocha government of 8 years, when he had the community governance, there were semblance of governance. He tried to bring government a little bit to the people, to the masses. And with that, the masses were able to be asked to identify the areas they wanted government to intervene. And a few of those things were also done, which goes to show that government is a continuum. But I'm saying that since this present government came in, all the things that, first of all, the effective PDP government of May 2019 to January 2020, there were the Rural Roads Project, the World Bank Rural Roads Project, which was started by the government of my party then. This project had over 30 roads being constructed, rural roads around Imo State. I also want to, and I challenge this government, go back and check if that project continued after this government.
All right, Mr. Nwachukwu. Mr. Nwachukwu, I'll just ask you to hold on a bit there. We have been joined in our Lagos studio by Mr. Jerry Chukwueke, who's a special assistant to SA to the Imo State Governor on New Imo. Mr. Chukwueke, thank you for joining us. If you can hear me, let me just put in this question to you. I'm sure you've been listening to the conversation and some of the things that have been said by Mr. Nwachukwu about the administration of Senator Hope Uzodimma in Imo State. The last one he talked about is the fact that before his party handed over, there was a World Bank project that had about 30 roads, and he says that project hasn't continued. But majorly, he's talked about the insecurity in the state and how your party and inadvertently the governor is the major person behind this whole insecurity in Imo State. What do you have to say about this?
Well, thank you for having me. First, let me just be clear. I am the Chief Technical Advisor to the Governor on New Imo project. New Imo is about a 10-year economic and social development plan for Imo State. I just wanted to clear that. Now, let me make a couple of comments. I've listened carefully to what the gentleman was talking about. I don't know which Imo he's actually talking about. First of all, the numbers show that the PDP party he's talking about, that about a third of their members have left them and joined our party and our governor. In fact, virtually all the members of their state executive council, state executive management of their party, resigned en masse and joined the Governor Hope Uzodimma's re-election campaign, and are now members of the APC. Furthermore, virtually all members of the PDP that were members of the National Assembly in the House of Representatives all resigned and joined the APC and Governor Hope Uzodimma's re-election campaign. Let me go further. Our current gubernatorial candidate for the APC and her husband, Mrs. Chinyere Kumaro, her husband, who was a very active until a few months ago member of the PDP, and in fact a former gubernatorial candidate of that party, is now one of us. And she came from the outside of the immediate APC family and has joined and is now the deputy gubernatorial candidate of our party. Why do I make this point? It is because the so-called political structures and oppositions have collapsed. Where they were working together about Imo State. We're Imo-centric. It's about Imo development. I can run some numbers for you. I don't know which Imo he's talking about, but all you have to go is check with the airlines. All the flights coming to Owerri are full. Going in and coming out. Look at the hotels. An occupancy rate, very high. Not only more robust, but in fact, increasing by day.
How about the insecurity issues that he mentioned?
I'm coming to that in a minute. Okay. In fact, when you look at the Owerri Capital Territory, and it's the 7-8 kilometers radius of the inner city, the applications for land allocation is so high that there's no land to be gotten. Our local people in the Owerri Capital Territory are now complaining about the pressure on their land, because more and more people want to move to Imo and have made such requests and are building residentials all over the place. A comment about insecurity. We know that what's happening here is second-tier, second-11 politics of the PDP. They are scared, terribly scared, traumatized about the shameful loss, embarrassing loss they're about to experience. And so all of this talk about insecurity, we bring it down to this. If Imo were insecure, like they're talking about, and they have their magic wine, and they're waiting for, after this pipe dream victory they believe they will have, and I don't know which century that pipe dream will happen. Now, if they believe that that were the case, and they're waiting for after November the 11th, why don't they trigger that? Just trigger the solution now, for the sake of Imo people. This is just optics of a political talk that is essentially a desperate one, looking for, if you would, how they save themselves from the calamity that is about to befall them. But let's go to security, yes. Insecurity.
Yeah.
Today in Imo State, there is more and more peace and quiet. In fact, our great governor has made some adjustments, working clearly with the security agencies about increasing confidence in Imo. Those security agents are now patrolling in the local government and rural areas, not roadblocks, not checkpoints, but actual patrols. So more and more Imolites are growing in confidence and going about their business, and Imo is moving forward. I talk about it some more. If you look at the numbers, what we've seen in political violence in Imo, to the extent we've seen it, is that vast majority of the victims and those that are being threatened are members of the APC or supporters or perceived supporters of Governor Hope Uzodinma. So what is the issue here?
But the PDP, pardon me if I may come in there, the yes. PDP also has concerns about attacks on some of its members. For instance, Honorable Ugo Chinyere, whose election was recently upturned by the tribunal representing Idiato. There was an attack on his home in January, I believe. The PDP is also talking about attempts to intimidate a deputy governorship candidate of their party, Dr. Onyereri. So how do you explain this? Because the PDP is pointing accusing fingers at the APC in Imo State.
First of all, my friend Ugo Chinyere and the issue of his election and what's happened at the tribunal, I'm sure you know, has nothing to do with Governor Hope Uzodinma. It has to do with the issue, my understanding of it, of where the election was conducted and if it did happen within his federal constituency. We put that aside. We've had accusations of some intimidation and violence, but there is no evidence that this had anything to do with Governor Hope Uzodimma. Let me give you an example of one of the federal immediate past members of the National Assembly from Osun local government in Imo. Honorable Jerry Alabosa was of the PDP, and all the many years he was a member of the PDP, he was fine. Nobody attacked his home. Nobody sought after him in his local government. The moment he decamped, resigned from the PDP, and joined our party and is supporting Governor Hope Uzodimma, his house was burned down. This is what we're seeing. I'll give you another example. You mentioned former Chief of Staff to Governor Rochas Okorocha, Mr. Uchenwosu, Chief Uchenwosu. The fact is that Chief Uchenwosu today is actively supporting the re-election campaign of Governor Hope Uzodimma. This is what we're talking about. What's attracting all of these people to this man we call our great governor? It has to do with the incredible developmental strides and opportunities that have been fully harnessed in Imo State, in road infrastructure, high-quality roads with drainage and street lights, education strengthened, rural government. He was talking about local government. As we speak, construction work and road construction, 5-kilometer roads per ward of the 305 wards in Imo is about 70% completed. Out of the 305 wards in Imo, we have 267 functional primary health care going on in Imo State as we speak.
We'll get to all of that. I'd like you to also respond to one of Mr. Nwachukwu's concerns, which is about the discrepancies in the number of accredited voters in some local government, Okigwe and Osu, particularly during the presidential and National Assembly elections. How do you weigh in on this?
Well, you have to talk to INEC about that. What we do know is that the work our great governor is doing is absolutely there for all to see. That's what Imolites are enjoying. That is why, and it's, by the way, not just the PDP. Almost half of Labour in Imo State has joined the Governor Hope Uzodimma's strain of re-election. We are moving forward. Quite frankly, I'm not sure that the gentleman done quite...
Is it easy for you to ask INEC to make the explanation because the outcome of the results there favor your candidate? Perhaps if they didn't favor your candidate, you have the same concern.
You're asking me to give you details and specifics of what an umpire took responsibility to oversee. What's winning Governor Hope's support and votes in Imo is the work he's doing. And it is clear, Imo is a transformed state.
Okay.
And we have it in all aspects of Imo development, like I was mentioning, across the board.
Yes, let's ask, well, I'm pretty sure Mr. Nwachukwu would like to respond to some of the issues that you have raised.
Yes,
Mr. Nwachukwu, it sounds like a good number of things that you mentioned have been shut down. How do you respond?
No, they've not been shut down. What just happened is that Sajeri in the studio just tried to make up some defense for the lackluster performance of the man over the Home of Affairs in the state. Let me tell you something. The only thing that he has said that is entirely correct is that there is pressure on land allocation in Owerri metropolis. And you know why? It is because of the insecurity in most of the hinterland. Almost the semi-urban Olo and Okigwe areas have been shut down. So most of the businesses there and the persons there are now moving into the capital city because they can't do their businesses in those areas anymore. I also want to talk about the issue of PDP officials and who are now moving into his party. I want to tell you something. What the governor has turned this political cycle into, the man is now campaigning with his projects. What is it? What has he done? There's a transfer system. What you have, like in the European football transfer system, He has opened that political and 2023 election transfer season in Imo State. It is now, politicians are for sale. People's words are now being known. People are being exchanged now for some aggrandizement. That is what you see. And I want to also tell you, when he says the whole executive moved, that is also false. 7 persons moved, not the whole executive. PDP in Imo State has a 17-man state working committee, a 17-man LGA working committee in the 27 local governments, a 17-man ward executive in the 305 wards, a 17-man working executive in the 4,758 wards in Imo State. Not one of these people have moved. Only those who want to be transferred, like you transfer people from Real Madrid to Barcelona. People are now moving in the other direction. We know what makes people to move, and that is what is happening. I also want to let you know that when you talk about insecurity, it says that Honorable Jerry Alaboso was never attacked because he was in the PDP. I also want to ask Jerry, Chief George Obiozo, the president of Ohanes Ndigbo, whose house was also attacked. Was he also a member of the APC or PDP at any point? What was his house attacked? All the persons, those Zurumba family from Osun local government, whose houses were burnt. I also want to ask you, is it because he was removed as commissioner by your government? Was it why his house was also attacked? These houses you're talking about, is it restricted to only PDP or APC? I'm talking about more of the common man, of the ordinary citizens who can no longer go home to their homelands. That's what is important. Let me tell you.
Mr. Nwachukwu, pardon me there. Pardon me, Mr. Nwachukwu. He who alleges must prove. What evidence do you have to prove that indeed the governor has created a transfer window for politicians in Imo State ahead of the 2023 elections?
Yes. There's a video. There's a video which I could have sent it to you online now. There's a video that is trending. I will also make it available to channels where these officials of the PDP that is said that moved over to the APC, this former deputy chairman, the youth leader, I think the public secretary, the woman leader, and one other person, they were in a local bar where they were sort of having a feel of the evening and also under some, enjoying themselves and entertaining themselves. And they said in that video, oh, look at how we are now. Our days are now better. These things we are drinking here, we were not drinking it before. These things we are eating here, we are not eating it before. We are eating these things now because we have moved over to Opus or the man, the APC. So what does that show you? Did they say they moved over because the man is doing well?
It's interesting that you raise these issues, Mr. Nwachukwu. It's interesting that you raise it this way, because the question that came to my mind when you began to mention those issues is, if your party was so formidable, would it be easy at all or possible at all for anyone to lure them away? But let me ask Mr. Chukwueke. He's raised some of these issues. Yes. I don't know if we can just focus on what the aspirations of your candidate is, and I'm pretty sure that Mr. Nwachukwu would also be. What are the aspirations of your
thank you.
60 seconds.
Thank you very much. What we're about to witness even more is the deepening of good governance in Imo State, because a solid foundation has been laid in education. Our great governor is attracted. The new Imo State University of Agriculture and Environmental Studies was able to ensure a 3 billion naira grant to build a solid foundation for the university's takeoff. He effectively recovered, and now the K.O. Mbadiwe University, fully functional. Not only that, what used to be Alvan Ikoku College of Education is now attracted federal presence.
So essentially, you're going to,
absolutely. So, because education is key in Imo.
We're running out of time.
And I quickly move. Let me add something else.
We are completely out of time. I want to take on Mr. Nwachukwu very, very quickly also on that one. 30 seconds, Mr. Nwachukwu. Rather than demarket, can you market? What is it that your candidate will be doing different that will make the lives of the people of Imo State better?
One, without security of lives and property, a governor and the government has no business in power. We want to restore security of lives and property, where our people can live peacefully, do their businesses, carry out their livelihoods. Without security of lives and property, you can't have proper education. If you go to most of the schools in Oso, Hadibam, and Dubuta, there are no pupils there. Most of the hotels in Imo, as I speak to you, are up for sale. Why? Because of low patronage. We want to bring prosperity back to the state.
So many other things that I'm pretty sure that we're going to be discussing in the coming months or days or weeks as the elections are coming. But Mr. Gozie Nwachukwu, Director of Administration and Spokesperson of the Imo State PDP 2023 Campaign Organization, thank you so much for your time, as well as Jerry Chukwueke Ese to Imo Governor, technical advisor, you say?
Yes.
To the Imo State Governor on the new Imo project. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Right. Your own comments on this program this morning, your own contribution to it. Eka Dixon, let's begin with you. The administration of President Bola Tinubu will be the most expensive one to run in the history of Nigeria. What will two ministers be doing in the Ministry of Youth? The ministry has been separated from the Ministry of Sports, and we are still having two ministers for youth. While we continue to lament on the effects of the high cost of governance, President Tinubu decided to appoint up to 3 ministers from some states without a clear roadmap as to why we need such a humongous size of the Federal Executive Council members. Most of the ministers of state in most ministries may be idle, but the taxpayers' money shall be used to service them. We must not reduce our governance to using ministerial slots to settle political associates only.
Well, Romekus Nwachukwu, unsurprisingly, is talking about Imo State. He says, I am a citizen of Imo State. I must confess the PDP and other Biafra faithful are the root cause of insecurity in Imo State. Nothing good from PDP in their days in Imo and Nigeria for 8 to 16 years. Hope Uzodimma is doing his best, and I support him for second term. On the insecurity in Imo, the governor is doing his little best, but PDP and Biafra faithful are the problem. Hope he's paying salaries and doing quality roads.
Yeah, I have this one from Professor Imonika Nakina Jr. He says, President Tinubu is a tweet. He says, President Tinubu promised single-digit interest rate loans, availability of student loans, cut down inflation and reduced our recurrent expenditure, address the humongous oil theft, and unveil a workable economic reforms backed by administration of policies that can actually create food security and guarantee farmer safety, safer farmlands, diversify the economy and invest in agriculture and solid minerals, invest in steel and textile industry, improve the capacity of power generation, distribution, and invest in other renewables to cut the rising cost of production by local industries, the SMEs, and the informal sector that employs the highest number of both skilled and unskilled workers. This will grow the export sector and cut the dumping of foreign goods in the country, and this will help in unlocking the true value of the naira in building a new economically resurgent nation.
And this was yeah. Well, perhaps by way of some balance to the one that you took the other time, Bukola, Darlington Mayor is saying Imo State is dead politically. The way and manner Governor Hope Uzodimma is ruling the state is something else. I live and work in Abuja. I can't visit home anymore because of insecurity. The governor is fighting everybody. He is ruling the state as if he owns the state. Imo State is known with nightlife, business, but as I speak, all are now in the past just because of the way the governor is running the state. May God help our dear state. Amen. Well, big bats, one would wonder. But then that's the show this morning. Thank you for the privilege of being a part of your morning. Have a wonderful week. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Indeed. Have a blessed week ahead. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Neota Egbe, wishing you a fantastic day and a beautiful week. Bye-bye.